Hey everyone, my name is Luke Thomas. I'm the founder of Friday. We're building tools to make it easier to work remotely, and welcome to another episode of Remote Rants, where I find interesting content online and we talk about it in the hopes that you and I learn a thing or two. So in this episode, we're going to go through a new Planet Money newsletter article called Why Remote Work Sucks According to Science. So let's dig in here. So the first thing that they start talking about is, and I'll just read it, like a decent chunk of the American workforce, Planet Money is now working remotely. Every morning we have an all-staff video conference on GoToMeeting. We use Slack for conversations. We record in closets and use Dropbox to transfer the files. We're making the best of it. We're happy to have the work, but no one really loves it. Since the birth of the personal computer, futurists have been predicting the death of the office. If we can chat over video and instantaneously exchange messages and files, they figured, why would we endure stressful commutes in fossil fuel burning vehicles just to sit side by side in brick and mortar buildings? I mean, we're mostly staring at screens there anyway. But the office has proven more stubbornly useful than we imagined. Between 2005 and 2015, despite the spread of high-speed internet and apps like Zoom, Slack, and Dropbox, the percentage of people regularly working remotely increased only between 2 and 3 percentage points. So the first thing that I will point out here is that this article in particular is referencing a study. So long story short, if you follow the breadcrumbs, it gets back to a US Census data, which indicates that, remote working has grown between 2 and 3 percentage points of the entire US population. And this is for people who have worked primarily remotely. So if we look at some other studies, which is kind of interesting, you can see essentially here's what's happening is that the percentage of, well, first of all, this is the entire US population. So it includes service workers. It includes people who literally have to be in a location to do their job. And so that kind of creates a larger size of the pie than what is actually kind of happening, especially in knowledge work. So you can see in a Gallup study, what's happening is the shift, right? And so pre-coronavirus, I believe this was done in 2017, what you saw was this kind of shift towards more flexible work. Not everybody was working remotely, right? So in 2016, 31% were working 80% or more remotely. But you can see this shift is kind of eating away at people who can't really work remotely at all, and it's kind of moving its way down. So this more flexible work environment has unfolded, and that is not being fully captured in the US Census data that this article references. An estimated 37% of American jobs could plausibly be done full-time from home, but before the pandemic, the total percentage of American workers that worked at least half the time from home was only 4%, right? That gets back to that study I mentioned. Now with COVID-19, about a third of the workforce is working remotely, and this transition hasn't been easy. At Planet Money, we're facing issues like how to replicate studio quality sound at home and how to maintain team camaraderie through cameras on our computers. We're not alone. According to a recent survey by the Society of Human Resource Management, over 70% of employees report struggles with shifting to remote work. Key important distinction. This is a survey of HR professionals. This is not a survey of actual employers. This is one department inside a company, right? So of course they're going to have some issues. Another survey by PricewaterhouseCoopers finds that about half of the companies believe they are witnessing a dip in productivity with this shift. Okay, let's trace the breadcrumbs here. So I pulled up the article here and looked and tried to find anything related to productivity. This apparently is what they're referencing. What are your top 3 concerns with respect to COVID-19? The effects on our workforce, reduction in productivity. This is the only place in the article that I've been able to find any reference of productivity. And this is a concern with COVID, right? Of course this is going to be a concern. When your kids are working from home, when your kids are home with you while you work, of course there will be a reduction in productivity. Let's scroll up because this is the funny part of the research. keep going. Which of the following is your company planning to implement once you start the transition back to on-site work? Half of the people surveyed said that they would make remote work a permanent option for roles that allow it. So here's my question. If it's really harming productivity, like this article in NPR suggests, then why do half of the respondents want to do more of the thing that apparently harms productivity? It doesn't make any sense. Back to the post. The Stanford psychologist Jeremy Bailenson has spent 2 decades studying virtual communication between humans, and he's cataloged the ways existing technology fails us. We talked with him naturally through Zoom. The technology is kind of awkward, and that's a big part of the problem. What's kind of funny is that they're using GoToMeeting for their video conferencing, so it's kind of funny that apparently Zoom is a problem, but GoToMeeting isn't. When we're actually face-to-face, we don't stare at each other's eyes for that long, Bailenson says. But the default setting on a lot of these video conferencing technologies is a Brady Bunch grid where everyone's staring at you right in the face. It's exhausting and super weird to have disembodied heads just staring at you for hours. I mean, honestly, this is a bit of an exaggeration because you can be on a video conferencing call and like literally be doing something completely different. It's not like people are just staring at you literally face to face for hours. There are breaks. This doesn't really make any sense. People have very dedicated personal norms about the proper space one should leave between themselves and others, he says. But when you're on a video call, your personal space is defined by how close the camera is to your face. In real life, this view of someone would be crazy. If you were regularly this close to a colleague's face in a physical office, you'd probably have serious problems with the HR department. We very rarely get that close to someone unless we're in a fight or an intimate situation, he says. I mean, I'm not going to argue with this point because, yeah, sure, maybe the camera should be a little bit further back. Maybe it's not proper social distancing. It's not all bad. In a series of experiments, Bailenson found that the gaze of a teacher in a video call made students pay closer attention, causing a short-term spike in their productivity. But he finds this sort of 1984-style constant gaze from a superior also causes mental overload. So I believe that we had run our studies over days, weeks, and months. Productivity would have a very steep decline. Of course, productivity would go down if you were staring at someone in the eyes all day long. Employers like offices so they can keep an eye on the people who do the actual work and motivate them to be productive. In other words, micromanagement. It's much easier to do that in person. The office is a favorite setting of thinkfluencers as well, who tout its serendipitous interactions. Think brains colliding with brains in random interactions that generate profitable ideas. Companies like Google and Facebook have bought into this idea, designing big offices with communal spaces to try and get creative juices flowing. In other words, the open office, which people hate. But apparently it's communal spaces in this article. Social scientists like Bailenson call this the water cooler effect, and it's something that is missing in the more structured communication on Zoom calls and even Slack, where everyone is trying not to interrupt everyone else and nothing seems to happen spontaneously. I don't know about you, but I think Slack is the exact opposite of structured communication. It's literally a constant water cooler chat. The office is also a place for social bonding, mentorship, and professional development. We're social animals with a gazillion nonverbal micro-expressions that we use to communicate, and these can be lost in two-dimensional digital mediums. True, I totally agree with this. This is why, at some point after COVID dies down, meeting up in person is still a part of the remote work experience. Many remote companies have company on-sites a couple times a year for this exact reason. This is a very fair point. It's also possible for many types of jobs being face-to-face might not matter for productivity. One study of call centers in China, for example, showed workers were actually more productive when working remotely. Not to mention, we don't have to waste time commuting. Bailenson hopes improvements in technology can make working remotely much better. He spent years studying and developing virtual reality, augmented reality, and other technologies with the hopes that they can liberate us from mind-numbing commutes. Awesome. But don't get too hopeful. Bailenson shared a story about the state of VR technology. When COVID-19 hit in March, the IEE Virtual Reality Conference, which is a sort of big annual VR event got canceled and they decided to hold a virtual one. They gave participants the option to participate with VR goggles on Zoom or via Twitch. In a simple the state of technology, Balin says, less than a quarter of the VR people decided to use VR to attend the VR conference. So we have a long way to go on that front. Until then, good luck with your Zoom calls. Anyway, I get it. VR is not where it needs to be. And, the potential could be very interesting. But it's clearly not there yet. And so, long story short, I think this article is pretty bad. But then again, I can't hurt them for trying to generate a lot of interest with a article title like this. So anyway, that is the end of my rant, and I hope you learned a thing or two today. Thanks.